Welcome back to episode 2 of Talking Consciousness. My name is Unfortunate Chemistry, and today I have G. White on the podcast, and he's going to be going through some of his tripping experiences, and we are going to discuss his opinions on the altered consciousness mindset. How's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Doing pretty good, man.
Man, good to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. So, why don't you just go right ahead and jump into some of your experiences?
Wow, man, that's a tough one. I've had, I would say, probably at least a handful of different experiences. Um, all of my experiences have been with either LSD or psilocybin mushrooms, and I've had really, I would say, only positive experiences with both. Um, my 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 first experience was with mushrooms. I would say about 10 years ago, maybe when I was like 18 or 19,
Okay.
and that kind of opened my eyes to the whole idea of even the altered state of consciousness, because really before you ever try anything, you kind of like don't even have an idea of what you're getting into. um,
Right, yeah. Oh,
and
I
and
agree with that.
I feel like the information that's out there now on the internet is so prevalent. Like, I don't really recall it being like that before, or at least unless you were into the networks that really talked about it a lot. Um, it just wasn't as omnipresent as I feel like it is now,
Yeah.
and so that was a game changer. I feel like, especially like kind of that turning point in your life. 18, 19, 20, going into college and stuff like that. That
Right.
really, like, it opens the doors to so many different other experiences. Um, your mind kind of becomes. I would say that one of the most interesting things I think about any psychedelic experience is that it does actually, you say open your mind, but it kind of actually literally does open your mind. Um, like, you become a more open person usually afterwards, after that first experience,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
which is really interesting to me. One of the most interesting things to
Do you find it hard
experience.
not being open now?
I would say I'm not a particularly open person to begin with. Um, just more like, I wouldn't say I'll close off, but just more of your typical, like, keep to yourself
Right.
type, introvert and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I would say that I fit in that same category.
but when you have that first, like, trip where, like, you're like, holy shit, like, everybody is one.
Right,
The
right.
world is, you're just like, that changes everything for you.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know that I listen to a lot of interesting people talk about the subject now, and like, I'm sure you're familiar with, like, Hamilton Morris.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's into, like, the idea that you know the like, we should stop talking about bad trips. Even though bad trips obviously do exist for some people, and some people have negative experiences even after the trip. Um, but he's like, most of the time it's 99% of the time you don't have a bad trip. It's just a challenging experience that you should learn from, or um, a more challenging experience than a positive experience.
Right. And you really
Um,
you really don't know how things are going to go. You hear it all the time, set and setting, and as long as your mindset's good and your environment is safe and familiar, that you will not have a bad trip. But you don't know what you're getting yourself into ever, because I really believe that these substances kind of have like you can set all the intentions that you want, okay? But I feel like they have their own intentions for you.
well, that's what they say about, especially like the ayahuasca spirit, like, the mother spirit,
Yes.
which I've, you know, that's like, I would say, my next big hurdle that I want to tackle.
That's
Like, I
mine too.
really would love to have that experience?
I'm going to be. I'm not going to the jungle or anything because I am not wealthy in any way, but I am going to be having ayahuasca experience in either March or April. I have all the ingredients, but I'm just waiting for the time to be right.
Wow, that's awesome. So because I know there's like, I think what they call is like pharmawaska, like synthetic,
Yeah, no, I'm
or
not
is it
doing
like
that.
you actually have your own
I
that you're gonna brew?
I'm gonna brew. Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. You know, there's a couple different things I've heard about that. There's the people that say, well, you can't beat the experience of the shamans, and then there's people that say, well, they put other substances in the ayahuasca brew, you know, during your long experience, I guess you would say.
Right.
Um, but I mean, I've also heard other people say, hey, you know, you can have any kind of experience you want to have in your own home. You don't need, you know, the
Yeah,
expertise
and
of
I've heard both. I don't so I'm kind of looking at it from the perspective of just wanting to explore that headspace a little bit and see what it has to offer. I am not going into it in the way a lot of people they go to these retreats almost as like a last ditch effort to get over something like a
Mhm.
depression, a serious like breakup or death in a family. Uh, and in the past, like if you would have talked to me a year ago, that concept would might have been a good reason to try this, but I have just found myself so comfortable and content in my life, and um, I don't really have anything that I need to heal. Now, I'm not going to be surprised if the Mother Spirit wants to show me some ways that I'm not the best version of myself, or ways that I've failed as, whatever
Yeah.
roles that I fill, father, husband. It might point out some weaknesses, and I have a feeling this is going to be my most challenging trip. But not everybody can afford the time off and a trip to Peru. It's just
Oh yeah.
it's a big ask. And then if you've seen, Viceland has a new show called Kentucky Ayahuasca, um, and it is actually
No, I've not seen that. That
there.
sounds good.
So there's this guy who had his first experience, and then he just he believes he's a shaman now. This guy has like no teeth, and he's a rough dude, and I don't want to be too harsh on the guy, but I feel like that is cultural appropriation. I think you can't call yourself a shaman if didn't you weren't.
So so it sounds like you're not big into well, it sounds like you're not as into the shamanic experience or the ritualistic experience. You're more into like, how is this
Well,
gonna
no.
affect me
So
and my psyche? And
that's what I'm going. I just feel like that's the only way I can pursue this without being with a real shaman. I
okay.
I I
Have
dis
you heard of the churches in the United States?
Yes, I have. I just I I don't think that's right. I really think that's cultural appropriation in the worst way. Not in the I'm offended. Uh, I can't have a costume party at my college campus. That's not the kind of cultural appropriation I'm talking about. I'm talking about, hey, here's this ritual that we've developed over probably 8,000 years, if I had to guess. And it is highly meaningful to my people, and it is literally like a rite of passage and a way of life. And hey, look, a bunch of white people are coming down from the city, and
Well, a lot of the guys I know in the Church of Mother Earth are legit. Uh, what I'm under the impression that they're legit, shamans with like the tradition and whatnot.
and as long as it's that way,
I'm
I'm
sure not,
fully
maybe not this guy
supportive.
from Kentucky
Yeah,
that
no,
has
no,
this
no.
experience.
Um, and I mean, so I'm kind of conflicted. On one hand, when you find that something has huge benefits, you want to share that. I get it. I totally get it. But if you can just do that without saying like that you have any sort of spiritual influence or power that was gained from these plants? Because I don't think you do, man. You are from Kentucky. The guy was a former bank robber. Like, they put the whole profile out there. The show really sensationalizes it. They, you know how television has to do. They say things. There's a guy on there. He's like, I've heard that ayahuasca can either kill you or change you or make you crazy. And I'm hoping it'll do the second. And I'm like, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to make you crazy, man. You're just trying to boost the ratings of this show. Come on.
That's too funny.
So I want to be able to explore my mind with it. Other substances I have taken, I wouldn't say they had a familiar spiritual aspect, like they had a spirit characteristic. I didn't feel I've never contacted an entity. I've never had that feeling of being spoken to by something either outside of this physical world or just some manifestation that happens in my mind. I've never had that experience. I've had deeply, deeply profound introspection where I look at myself from the third person. I've had experiences of oneness, experiences of understanding what the concept of like a god would be, but nothing like directly spoke to me and took my hand, and that's something I'm interested in with that ayahuasca experience. So I'm gonna make my brew, and I have a playlist on Spotify of Icaros, and I'm gonna pop that in, and I'm gonna lay in my bed with a bucket, and that's gonna happen. And
then you get strapped in for 8 hours or whatever.
now with this podcast, maybe one day I will be able to do a traditional ceremony, and if I ever get the opportunity, trust me, I'm going to take it. It's just not feasible right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think the next big vacation I want to do, if I have a choice, I'd like to go to Peru and do that.
That would be fantastic, man. And
But
I would love for you to come back.
it's not right
and
on the
share
horizon.
Story.
Oh yeah. Because I'd like, part of me wants to say, well, it'd be so easy just to go down to one of these, like in my old hometown, there was a church that held rituals like every weekend, and like even on the weekdays, and you could do like a day ritual, you could do a night ritual, you could do like over like 2 days over the weekend, and you could do like 3 ceremonies,
Right.
and it sounded really amazing. And it sounded completely legit.
Right.
But it's kind of like, I don't know. Part of me wants to give Peru a try.
Yeah.
And like, how can you beat that setting?
Yeah, you can't. That sounds absolutely phenomenal.
I think the ritual aspect of it, I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it's everything, but it's definitely it's something to it. Like the mind space that you get into.
Yeah, I mean,
Just like with any other experience is
absent
important.
of the chemicals themselves that are producing this profound state, ritualism can induce altered states of consciousness. This has been widely documented, so I'm sure there's a huge aspect to that. I mean, I don't think there's any way to get around that.
And I think like with I want to say with ayahuasca in the past, I don't want to say it's I just feel like it's kind of a more subtle compared to like an LSD or a mushroom trip or smoking DMT. Like you don't know exactly what's going to happen when you have one of those experiences, but something is going to happen.
Yeah.
And with the ayahuasca, it's a little more like you're being guided, and
Right.
it's a long experience, so you kind of like are slowly being taken somewhere else, and the shaman has an integral part in this kind of journey. Whereas if you smoke DMT, it's like,
Hello.
5 seconds later, 5 seconds later, something is gonna happen,
Yeah.
and then you'll have been gone for another 5 minutes, and and you'll be back.
I mean, it sounds like the perfect gentleman's trip. You're like, man, I don't have time. I don't have time to be frickin' dancing around for 12 hours on LSD. Let's smoke some DMT, and I'll be back in
Yeah,
5 minutes.
I I hear all the time when I'm watching. I know you mentioned like Joe's podcast. Like you mentioned, like, oh, I just used to order it by the bucket,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh God, like how amazing would that be?
Times
Because
have changed, man.
I would love to get a hold of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I'm not as uh, savvy with the more interesting parts of the internet where that's still possible.
Oh, yeah, like the dark web. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I will say before we get on to your first trip, last quick comment. I'm really glad that I did not discover psychedelics until I was an established. I had like an established family unit, a solid job, and like all my responsibilities in order. Because had I discovered psychedelics when I was, say, 16 or 17, I don't think I would be as responsible with my use. Um, and I'm not saying that everybody is that way, but I know for a fact, me personally, I would have been that way because I can totally obsess over things. And if I found out that, like, I can go to this other world and I don't have any reason to not, I
let's just
would
do
be,
this every day.
I would be doing it. Maybe not every day, but I would have been doing this a lot. And I have like an agreement with my wife where I'm only tripping every so often. And currently, that agreement is twice per year. So, for a lot of people, that might sound super bizarre, especially people who are in this
Oh, that sounds pretty healthy.
field. But yeah,
I think that overall, especially that overall like series you laid out, like I would say I think I was 18 the first time and yeah, because it can like psychedelics can scoop you up and just completely change you.
right.
And so, like you said, like that you're an established, you had your routines, you had your family. That like I think that's really important because you had those underlying structures to ground you.
Now it did
So all of your exploration kind of branches out from
it
that
did
instead of
change me
completely.
though, profoundly. I mean, it the most like spiritual experience of my life. Uh, like you hear about people who they become religious, through like Christianity or something.
Mhm.
And then they just wake up one day and they're not the same and they're a different person. And they'll tell you that and they'll tell you how their life was changed. I'm telling you, man, that is how it was for me. Once I dipped my toes into the psychedelic dimension, I mean, I just wasn't the same. Once you have that feeling of that oneness and that interconnected with everything, and the idea that, at least for me, I know this is very common, but what was communicated to me through the experience was love, man. And while maybe these ideas aren't really that out there, and at the base, everybody kind of knows it's true. But like until you see this stuff firsthand, sometimes you just don't live in a way that's true to that idea. And it shook me, and it made me examine how I was living, and I had a lot of anger beforehand, and now I'm much more present, and I can see that I'm getting angry about things now, and I go, wow, why am I angry, and is this worth is this anger beneficial to me? What, and it's like it just put myself under a magnifying glass and had me like basically realize that I wasn't living authentically, and I wasn't living to the idea that like love is the primary motivation behind everything. And man, if you love yourself and you love other people, uh, and you live in a way in accordance to that, man, my life got so much better once I started doing that. So I
That's
definitely
that's unbelievable,
changed
man.
me. It definitely changed me. There's no getting
And if
around
that's
it.
and if that's not like I, I would say that's one of the better definitions of God I've ever heard.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah,
Were you spiritual? Did you have any kind of religious or spiritual
I
background before
was
this, before that experience?
I was a Christian. I was past tense. It shook me too much, and uh,
You were a practicing Christian before the
yes,
experience,
every Sunday I was at church.
and afterwards
I stopped.
you stopped. Wow.
I didn't stop immediately.
See,
And
but I think that message you just laid out is pretty much the under. I mean,
it's
maybe not the manufactured,
if you take if you take the
message that's out
money,
there with churches, but I think that
yeah,
if you get to the underlying roots of like a Judeo-Christian message, that's pretty much it.
when you take the money out of church, I think that's what it is. But as long as there's money, there has to be somebody who gets to disseminate the information and the spirituality,
Hmm.
and they're in that position of power. If money wasn't a part of it, I think they would be preaching on love, purely love. But because money's a part of it, they kind of keep that hidden a little bit because they need you to keep coming back and they need you to keep supporting them. And I don't
Well, it's
know.
like the the outer veneer of structures is kind of all we see now of
Yes.
what I don't know. I think a lot of people just fail to get to the root of what you know the message should be or message. It's hard to quantify exactly where these things go wrong. But
Right.
I'm not sure exactly what your background is. Like you said, Christian, so I would assume some type of Protestantism in the United States, or Catholicism, or
Well,
I was kind of the same.
it was the
Uh,
church that I belonged to. It was like they were called Church of Christ, but it was very like non-denominational.
mhm,
I was not dogmatic, and I was already kind of becoming disenfranchised
mhm.
prior. I think that might be a part of the reason why psychedelics sounded like a good idea. I've always had doubts and questions, not of the idea of a god, and that's another thing I just want to point out there. I think you can analyze it. You can try to be as intellectual as you want to, but once you have the psychedelic experience, I'm sorry, I think you're gonna believe in God. uh, you don't have to
So
call
you
it.
so you still believe in
You don't have
in
to call it that. You don't have to.
yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
don't. I don't think God a is a cosmic male figure, as Alan Watts says. I believe that God is the overall energetic field of the universe. I truly believe that's what God is. And
the structure of reality.
yeah, and look, man, I'm energy and you're energy. Everything around us is made out of energy. That's all there is. I mean, if you really
Mm.
strip away the layers and the ideas of materialism, all there is energy, and that never dies. Energy doesn't die. It just transfers. Think about it. What is like the number one characteristic you hear about God? They say God is eternal. He never dies, and he's omnipresent. He's everywhere all the time.
Mhm.
Oh, wait a second. That kind of sounds exactly what I just described. This
Mhm.
overall all-encompassing energetic field. I don't believe that God has a role as a leader or as a punisher or as a person who sets rules. I don't even think God has like a,
Well,
a
it
consciousness in the
depends on the
ways.
context of how you think about it, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. So I mean, I guess
So it's like
technically, if
the
God is
universe.
the energetic field, he does have rules because it's the rules on which the universe
Hmm.
works. But I just
Hmm.
don't mean there's no dogma, and I think dogma is where religions got it wrong.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
you can you can you can come up with your parables, your metaphors for what this energetic field is. I'm totally fine with that. But when you start saying, um, even though you've just given a like human-esque identity to this energetic field, once you start saying that identity thinks that anyone doesn't belong and like people need to be saved and things like that, I think you're going in the wrong direction, and
Yeah,
you're missing the point. You're missing it.
agreed. Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of interesting points there, in the but because I mean, it's just hard to explain where people kind of diverged. Well, first of all, I think we kind of lose touch with like what actually are we reading? What actually are we? What rules? What are these rules that we're abiding by? And like you said, we start manifesting some type of God and some like you said, a male cosmic figure. Well, that there are reasons why I feel like people attributed these things to a God or to God in the past, and they might have been sophisticated ideas. But here we are looking at it, 5,000 years later, 2,000 years later, depending on what time frame you want to look at,
Yeah.
and we just kind of don't understand the type of phenomenology that they're using. That's like there's kind of an interesting reason why God would be male, because a male representation kind of represents these sophisticated ideas like let's say culture or um, certain things that a masculine presence can and in the opposite turn, there's a lot of manifestations of God that are feminine, and
Yeah,
those
yeah.
have a an interesting component as well. And
So
so often in trip reports you hear about the feminine earth spirit.
so I
You
have an
know,
idea. How about we start a new religion where God is transgendered?
well, I think there's a duality to what a proper representation of God,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least the God that exists here on Earth, because Earth is such a feminine spirit. And
Yeah.
if you I, I'm a huge uh, Jordan Peterson
Same.
person.
Absolutely.
So you if you're familiar with his he talks about a lot about the Mesopotamian creation myths.
Mhm.
So you have this kind of yin and yang representation of Tiamat and Apsu. The where kind of Tiamat is like the chaos god or pre-god almost, and they're locked in this embrace. Um, where and he invokes it if in his introduction to Genesis, chaos and order. So order is the masculine representation, whereas Tiamat is the feminine, chaotic creation of all things, the water of earth,
Right.
the salt water, and that represents all life. And they're created in this constant struggle, fighting against each other, which is such a amazing idea, and just so it's endless the amount of things you can talk about based off that one small idea. It's you have culture and you have humanity kind of in this interesting back and forth with the earth.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, absolutely.
it's man, it's yeah, Jordan Peterson can just blow your mind every 10 minutes watching
So you watched
his biblical stuff.
his biblical lecture series?
I Yeah. Oh,
Had
I think it's like one of the most incredible
had you told me 10 years
series.
ago that I would spend roughly 40 hours listening to somebody talk about the book of Genesis, I would have been like, bullshit. I
I
listened
try
to
to
that
I
whole
try to tell
series, man.
everyone.
It was awesome. It is so good. It is so good to hear it
Yeah.
broken down like that. Um, yeah, I think he has a fantastic mind. Um, I I do see the argument some people are making that I think uh, Jordan needs to stay in his own lane. uh, in like the human studies, he keeps venturing out into some other realms that I don't think even if he is knowledgeable, he just doesn't have the credentials, and I think he would be better off not talking about like climate change and stuff like that. But
Well, the good thing he does, I think, is he acknowledges, when he has specific amounts of expertise, and when he doesn't, he's honest about everything he says.
I watched
You know, he,
him on the Rubin Report with Eric Weinstein, And I was blown away that like it's just so counter to how society works today. Uh, Eric Weinstein is a super intelligent man, and he disagrees a lot with some of Jordan Peterson's ideas. And most people, you put two intelligent minds in a room, and they disagree, and they bicker and argue, and nothing is learned. Maybe the viewers learn, but neither of them learn. They don't take anything away. They just come out saying like, "Wow, he's an idiot," and the other guy thinks he's an idiot. And I watched this, and like, I actually watched the podcast, and to see Jordan like he had so much respect for this guy, and he kept getting like silenced mid sentence because Eric had something like basically to teach him, and he was so receptive to it. You could see that he was learning. So having like a role model like Jordan Peterson's definitely a role model of mine, but then seeing him humbly learning from another master, it was just refreshing because I don't think that's something you get in today's like super political environment where everything is so polarized.
Well, that's why that whole group, quote unquote, the intellectual dark web. That's why those guys are so amazing. I think for what that reason you just pointed out right there. I mean, it's like, first of all, they're all, brilliant in their own ways, and then they have this kind of commonality of actually honestly wanting to learn something from each other,
Right.
and just having that actually represented, like you said, like, oh, maybe I do have something to learn, and well, 12 rules, treat the person you're talking to as if they have something to teach you. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so that's one of the 12 rules,
Yeah.
which I got to see him on tour
Oh, you
not
did.
that long ago. Yeah, it was incredible.
So I am in the Ohio area, and a couple months back, Facebook advertised to me that he was going to be playing in Cincinnati. He was going to be live in Cincinnati, and oh my God, I saw this, and you should have saw it. My wife knows I love Jordan Peterson. I saw this ad. I jumped up. I hadn't been that excited about something in a while. I mean, I was bouncing. I had energy, man. And then I
Well,
clicked.
I've got a great story for this afterwards. Keep
Okay.
going,
Yeah,
keep
so
going.
I click this link, and it takes me to like some Ticketmaster thing, and the tickets are like $35. I'm like, holy crap, this is great. And then I click on it, and I go all the way through checkout. Turns out the Facebook ad had the wrong link, and that ticket was it for something else. I didn't finish the purchase because right at the very last page it showed me that it wasn't actually for Jordan Peterson. And then I found his on their website, and it was over $100, and I couldn't justify the purchase, and I was like super depressed for like 2 days because of that.
Oh, that's tough.
It
That
was like
sucks.
I felt like my balloon had just deflated.
So so my most recent experience of psychedelics, I dropped a tab of LSD. This has had to have been 6 months ago, and I don't know. It was a great day. I was feeling really good. Um, I woke up like really early for my standards, which is probably like, I don't know, normal person working 9 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
and I worked out, um, and I was gonna have the house to myself the rest of the day. And I'm like, shit, what should I do? And I'm like, man, I should really do. And sometimes I think you kind of like, I didn't know I was gonna do psychedelics that day, but like just everything, the lanes all kind of opened at the same time, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, what a great idea this would be.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's sometimes like the best way. Like, a lot of times we plan and we plan, and we set aside a lot of time. It's like sometimes you just gotta like go with the flow of what your brain is telling you, and
Right.
you have one of those perfect days. And anyways, I was like, all right, I got these tabs that I've had left over for, I don't know, a year or 6 months or whatever. I'm like, I'll start with half a tab. And then I had half a tab, and I had something to drink, and then I'm sitting there, and about an hour later I'm like, well, I feel great. I'm like, I don't know if it has anything to do with the drugs, but I'm like, this is the perfect time. When am I going to get a better time? So I just took the other half of the tab, and I strapped in, and it was like, the, I, you know, solo tripping is an interesting thing. It's kind of different. Uh, so different than tripping with any friends or any others.
I mean, personally, I think it's the only way.
Really? So you're one of those like I'm gonna
Yeah.
sit in my room and in the dark, or
Well, not
or do you like
necessarily.
doing something,
Maybe doing something.
even doing something on your own? See, I'm just I struggle with like I mean I've done it solo a couple times, but I feel like the social setting is really nice. Um, Depending, I mean you got to be with somebody you're really comfortable with, or people you're really comfortable with.
Yeah, yeah. People
So
you
like
can trust.
yeah, and it's great. Like I think for those experiences kind of lend themselves to I would say like a bonding experience.
Yeah.
Because it's almost, we say trip, but it is kind of like a journey, like condensed into like a 6 hour experience or 8 hour experience,
Yeah.
and you kind of feel like you've accomplished something together afterwards in some weird way, and
Right.
it definitely brings you closer with those people if you know, which I think is an amazing thing. Um, so I'm doing this solo trip in the morning, and I'm having a great time. The last couple times I kind of always get stuck, I would say. Um,
I mean, like in a thought loop.
not in a thought loop, but in just a mode of action. Um, it's like I don't really. Typically, I confine myself to the house or whatnot, and I have roommates. So while I know consciously that I 99 times out of 100 I'm going to be on my own, I still kind of don't want to be naked in the living room at
Right.
3 o'clock and have somebody come home. So, I'm like, all right, I've got these realms that I can explore, and I'm pretty free to do that. But anything could happen because the day that you're tripping tripping your brain out on LSD is the day that your roommate comes home in a panic at 1 o'clock and some emergency is happening. So
Throws you into
try to
bad
avoid that
trip
at all costs.
territory.
Um, so I kind of what I get stuck in is I strap my headphones in and then I start watching YouTube videos,
Okay.
and because you can just endlessly explore anything at that point. And like so the first time I did this, I discovered ASMR. Have you ever done ASMR on?
No, I have not.
That is a weird thing to discover when you're you're into an LSD trip. Let me tell you, that is a rabbit hole that if you have no conception of what that is before you're going into it, your life is going to be different. It's like one of the strangest YouTube communities, but super cool in a funny way.
Man, to be an early adopter of that.
Yeah, I don't even know, man, what these kids are doing. There's like a million and one people on YouTube doing it now,
Yeah.
and some of it is like the strangest thing, like because it's all very oddly sexual.
Right.
Even though everybody's like, "Wait, no, this isn't sexual at all," but I'm doing ASMR when I'm dressed as a French maid, and it's like, all right, whatever. But this most recent time, I would say it had to have been like 4, and so I'm probably if I'm not at the peak, I'm really close to it, and I think I watched a complete hour and a half lecture of one of the 12 rules.
Yeah.
One of the 12 rules tour. I forget which one it specifically was, but I think it was just him lecturing at a college. Jordan lecturing at a college,
Yeah.
and he started. He has these moments where he starts getting into some subject really deeply, or getting into something that has some personal meaning for him, and he starts to break down. And it's like you kind of when you're actually hearing it sober, sometimes he just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. But when it's kind of snuck in so quickly to me in my altered state, and before I knew it, I was just like weeping.
Wow.
So I'm sitting there listening to Jordan Peterson, and like my mind's being blown by all the like intense stuff, intense ideas he's manifesting, and then all of a sudden like he has this emotional experience, and I'm like right there with him. I'm like weeping.
Right.
I'm like God, like because I'd already I was already pretty familiar with his stuff at that point, but I don't think I'd really dived head into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had that like such an emotional reaction to, and I'm, it's pretty amazing that I could actually sit there and listen to an hour and a half lecture on acid in the first place. So for something to grip me that much and be that interesting to me, I think is a testament to his engageability.
Well,
um,
not only can these things make you a more open person, but for me personally, but I think it's universal. I think psychedelics make you a more empathetic person. S-
100. Oh yeah.
And especially while you're under them. I mean, definitely after, but
Well,
while,
I
yeah,
think they say it can like the trait openness on the the five trait system that he works from as a personality
yeah,
psychologist. I think it can a profound psychedelic experience, especially the first one, can change your trait openness by 2 standard deviations. That's what they
right,
say. Is
yeah,
what Jordan. I think that's what his quote or his statistic.
yeah, yeah.
If I'm correct with
Yeah,
that one.
I
Which
believe that's what I've heard him say
oh
as
yeah,
well.
and the studies they're doing now out of the big universities. I think it's Johns Hopkins. If I'm not.
Yeah, there's John Hopkins in America, and then the Imperial College in the UK.
Yeah, they're coming out with a lot of interesting data. Like I think it's John Hopkins with the psilocybin trips,
Yes.
and a lot of the data they have, and a lot of the manual, uh, the communication they get back from people say it's like the most meaning, even even like a substandard, by probably by our measurements, by the psychologist measurements, a substandard trip is still like one of the handful of profound experiences and that are most meaningful experiences in that individual's life, even like 2 years later after the trip, which is like incredible. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, you have to implement. Without the implementation, you're not gonna have such a lasting effect. But when you can incorporate the things you saw and the things you learned, I mean, I think it can change you for a very long time. I actually found the procedures and protocols, like PDF, for how the trip sitters were engaging people for the John Hopkins studies, and I read through it. It was like 65 pages, but
wow.
I read through it, and then I recently trip sat a friend of mine for his first. It wasn't shrooms, but it was for acetoxy dimethyltryptamine, which is, for all intents and purposes, is synthetic shrooms. Most people would agree that it pretty much is the same thing as psilocybin. Um,
Really?
it's called psilocybin, but when it's metabolized, it just does pretty much the same thing. And
Similar length of time as well.
yeah, yeah. I gave him an equivalent dosage of this chemical to an eighth of shrooms, and yeah, he was under for about, I'd say, 6.5 hours.
So you followed the guidelines and the
Yeah.
same guidelines they're working off of with the Johns Hopkins,
Yep.
which I think sound in principle, from what I've heard of them, really smart.
Yes. Yes. And that's what
Like
it wasn't like.
especially in the trip management aspect.
It was there, like they had a lot of rules, but in actual application, you don't do a whole lot. I set a playlist for him of some music that was meaningful to him,
Hmm.
that carried like significant weight to him, not just music that he enjoyed. Uh, and I prepared the room to be very gentle and loving. I was there if at any time he needed anything. But other than that, I wasn't like questioning him or anything like that during
Was this was his first experience?
it's only so far.
Wow.
Um, but he he had a strong experience, and he couldn't even talk about it afterwards for a few days. Like, um, I don't. He hasn't explained it in the most profound ways, but I'm sure it was profound because he was just in a different place for a little bit afterwards. Um, Honestly, I was nervous as hell the whole time because he was not like every couple of hours I'd try to give him some water and stuff. He wasn't responding to me at all.
Wow.
I couldn't get a word out of him. He didn't say a word for 6.5 hours.
Wow.
He didn't utter a word. He
That's insane.
never cried or whimpered. He hardly moved. He sat up on my couch with his hood over his eyes, and like halfway through, I was like, "All right, man, I really want you to drink some water," and all he did was he gave me a thumbs up. And he didn't talk and he didn't drink the water. He just gave me a thumbs up, telling me that he was good. So I just let him be, you know.
It's a lot of nonverbals.
Yeah, yeah,
So we're going back. That's like I would say like a regression, a little bit to like a childlike state.
yeah. Oh,
Sounds like
absolutely.
that's
The,
interesting.
the psychedelics
I've
can
never had an experience that
they can
I would say
certainly take your language. Maybe not. I wouldn't say you usually are going to be without language the whole time, but I think there has been a part of every trip I've ever been on where I lost the ability to make coherent sentences.
that's interesting. I don't know if maybe I've never gone the like heroic dosage route, so that could be why.
Right.
For me, I've never had that.
Yeah, they're
Um,
those doses. Yeah, they, they
so
they do something else, man.
yeah, I've never sought to open that door all the way. Maybe it's probably because I've never had a situation like you laid out where I had a really free and open environment. Like, there's always, for me, there's always like the possibility of, a semi-open environment. Like,
Right, right.
I don't know. And
There's
especially like, you always have that thing in the back. Like, I've never had it. A trip sitter, if I'm doing something on my own, or you kind of always, when you have the chance to be completely isolated or completely free of any intervention, that's always a lot more so reassuring.
well, when you get into that heroic territory and when you're alone, uh, I still agree that there's no such thing as a bad trip, but that is where you get challenged beyond comfort.
Hmm.
Anytime I've gone too far, I mean, there's before the ego is totally disillusioned, before it's gone. Um, but when I feel it ripping, I always start thinking. I mean, every time, I wish I could go back. I wish I didn't do this. And after the experience, I'm always glad that it happened. But in the
I would.
experience, there's always something of total, like, I mean, fear. I mean, it's the
Hmm.
most profound fear I've ever experienced. I mean, it's like
Existential fear.
it's like, yeah. I don't.
Will I ever be the same after
Will
this?
Yeah? Will I be the same after that? That's how I
The,
would say it.
the right
Um,
question. The right question should be, do I want to be the same after this?
well, here's the thing. Um, just so, just in my own personal experience, and I'm not. This is not a recommendation or a prescription for anyone else. But in my experience, you are basically the same afterwards. I don't. It doesn't really matter how far out you go. At least for me, even though sometimes you feel like you've absolutely lost your mind and you're not gonna make it back, you always end up waking up that next day after the experience, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm I'm back to baseline. Like I feel like myself again. And when you forget what feeling like yourself even is, when you forget what that experience is of being yourself, God, like you don't know if you can come back to something that you don't even remember what it's like. That's how far that's what the heroic dose does. You get to a point where you're like, I don't remember what it's like to not be in this state.
Hmm.
And it's scary. But it's also like, it's scary being there, but it's also scary thinking about going back, because you go, I can't remember what it was like. I'm not sure if I want to go back, because what if that's not good? What if this is the good experience? But trust me, every time I have come back, I've always been relieved.
Grateful to be back to
Yes. Yes. Like,
our segment of reality.
yes. It definitely gives you appreciation for the mundane. When you go really far out, it makes the mundane just seem so comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I would kind of agree and kind of disagree at the same time.
Yeah.
Like I think you definitely like you're never well 900 99.999% of people I would think aren't going to have some kind of profound personality shift off of their first experience. But I mean, I feel like you can, if you take anything meaningful from any experience, you've changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is my way I would frame it. So even if it's a small thing, like I think the change that you outlined from your first experience, I would say that's a huge shift. Where you kind of reconceptualized so it sounds to me like you sort of reconceptualized your whole spiritual reality.
I did.
And I would say that's, I mean, pretty groundbreaking stuff
Well, I mean,
for somebody.
in the Christian faith, and that's what it is. It's a faith. It's like, it's so faith based. It's like the religion itself is just about trust or faith. It's like, these things are true because they're true. I was told they're true. I read they're true. They're true. I believe it, but like, you're just telling yourself you believe it. You don't have any experience to really make you believe it. I don't care what you say. I mean, I've heard some kooky stories in church. Even like, when I was very faithful to the religion, I've heard some things where I'm just like, bullshit detectors just start going off like crazy. Like fucking, pastor says I was really struggling, and a stranger showed up at my house with a truck full of groceries, or we didn't have any money, but we still paid our tithes, and then we checked the bank account and there was $500 in there. Bullshit. There it goes. Ding, 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 ding. The fucking alarms are going off. That is fucking bullshit. That never fucking happened. You're a liar.
It dropped down from the heavens
You
into my
say
bank
shit
account.
like that, you're a fucking liar. God, no wonder, like, if you are in a church right now, I don't care if you're a Christian, that's fine. But if your pastor's ever said a story like that to you, please find a better church, because he's fucking lying to you.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people out there that aren't as honest as they should be.
Yeah.
Know?
So then when I had this first experience, it was no longer about faith. Faith wasn't required. You don't have to have faith to believe something you've felt and seen. Mm-hmm. When you've never truly felt it or you've never truly seen it, you have to have faith to believe that something's real. You have to have faith that Santa's real, because you haven't fucking seen Santa. But
well, that's why psychedelics are so powerful, because they're so tangible.
Yeah, they are. Like, you can't tell me that experience wasn't real.
A tangible representation of the spiritual realm.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was a full-blown experience. I had sight, I had smell, I had taste, I had every one of my senses.
As well as a sixth sense of the communication with the transcendent.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was totally dialed in to the experience of the spirit, and like, yeah, I feel like that's going to change somebody. But I guess it kind of just depends on how skeptical you are, because some people are going to, the intellectual part of their brain is going to snap back after a trip and try to fight back against that. And I just didn't. I was like, wow. I just liked it. I liked it a lot. When I came out of it, I was like, man, that's something I can hang my hat on. This is an idea that jives with me, and I could go the rest of my life with this idea of what the spiritual realm is.
Yeah. I don't know if I've yet to meet someone that's had the opposite experience, where they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, well, I've had this experience, but let's put that off in a box and not
Well,
think about it."
I have. I have
You
met
have?
I have
Oh,
met somebody
I
who's
have
done
not.
that.
I don't know how you can do that. I mean,
Because they're not being authentic to themselves, man.
yeah, you're not really you're not searching your true. Yeah, you're not digging deep enough into the origin of your feelings, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause I think that's the hard part about most trips is they really, if there's something you've been ignoring or there's something you've been putting off in the recesses of your mind, like that's the first thing that's going to come up.
So
And
there,
if you don't want to deal with that, you're going to have a bad time.
yeah. So there's a phenomenon that happens in churches that makes people believe in the entire message of the church. But this phenomenon is it just happens. It just happens. You don't have to be in a church for this to happen. But when when you're like singing songs and they you can relate to the song and you're kind of in an emotional state, you get chills, you get goosebumps,
Mm.
hair on the back of your neck stands up. Now
Hmm.
the church literally will tell you that's the presence of
That's the
God.
spirit. Yeah.
um, and you know, I don't think they're wrong. It's just they're not being totally honest. And
Well,
so
you're framing it in a dishonest way.
yeah,
Well,
so
that's kind of the whole thing with I would say modern religion. You know, you kind of lost sight of the honest representation of the
right, right.
experience
And
completely.
so when I got back from my first trip, um, music became so much more. I mean, I've always been I just love music. I love it, but it became so much more profound to me.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I can remember being at work, just doing my job, and listening to the Animals album by Pink Floyd. And I'm telling you, the whole time I was like on the edge of crying. My hairs on my arms were standing straight up. I felt light as a feather. And I was like, yeah, I'm connecting to God right now, and I'm not doing it in a way where I'm like directly worshiping some entity like I used to do in church. Like it totally
Yeah.
had nothing to do with God, yet it was God. Like that experience is connecting to that energetic field. Um, and now music in general is just so spiritual to me. I mean, as long as it's good music and it
Good
has
music.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it has meaning to me. Um,
Well, I
but
think music is the best representation we have for a proper structure of reality.
you think that's where it comes from, though,
Music,
right?
mathematics. I think so. It's like such a deep experience, and it's like really the heart of what a human experience is for whatever reason.
Yeah,
I think maybe we've just been doing it for so long. Maybe
right.
it's just so ingrained in us as like as a pseudo spiritual activity or I know it's like the the patterned representation of proper harmony of existence, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, where, like whenever I listen to classical music, that's the intuition I get.
Right.
Like it's one of those things that almost inevitably will be one of the first things I do into a psychedelic trip. I'm gonna open some Bach or Beethoven or
Right.
something, and I'll just like revel in the complexity,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I'm just like, why aren't there famous composers of the 21st century that we listen to on a daily basis?
Because
Orchestral,
we've just lost
orchestral
touch.
orchestras, and I know there's plenty of classical composers that are around, but
Yeah.
they aren't celebrated like they were. There aren't these icons uh,
Well,
of music
because
that they used to be.
music today is just so materialism. It's so materialistic.
Hmm.
And it's so. I mean, it's fucking. It's like an advertisement. Listening to
Mm.
modern music that's made today. not that all music made today is that, but
It's shallow.
what is allowed to be shared. Like, good music today is not allowed to be disseminated. They don't put it on the radio. That's for damn sure. Um, and yeah, so it's like it it has ulterior motives. It's not the spiritual thing at all. It's like to help propel along.
Disconnecting from the spirit. I
Yeah,
think it's
I mean,
so what would it be?
it's
I'm sorry.
intentional. You know what I mean? It's like the music today is trying to disconnect you from the spirit. It's trying to make you more.
I think there's a lot of things like that in our world that we've constructed
Yeah,
that see I mean just think about the illegality of psychedelic drugs in itself. I mean,
oh, crime against
you
humanity,
don't,
dude.
I agree 100%. And people look at me like I'm insane when I talk about this. Like, no, just for 1 second, think about the immense amount of dangerous drugs that are at our daily disposal that no one bats an eye about, and yet psilocybin mushrooms and LSD is illegal and Schedule 1
Right.
in the United States at least,
How many people?
and it's just mind blowing.
How
It's
many people
absolutely
have
mind blowing.
taken 3 scoops of a pre-workout powder and had a heart attack?
Yeah, you could. People die all the time from caffeine overdose,
It's crazy.
alcohol. I mean, alcohol is just
Yeah,
like
the
I love
worst.
alcohol. I mean, I honestly like it's. I'm a bartender. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love alcohol.
But it's
I love
just
drinking it.
the worst
Um,
offender.
but it's horrible for you. It's
Yeah.
horrible for you, and it's horrible for your long-term psyche. If you abuse it long term, I mean, it's horrible for your liver. I mean, jeez. And yet here it is. It's like everybody does it all the time,
And no one
often every
cares.
day.
No one
No,
cares.
no one cares. And yet, I mean, who's ever, you could probably count on your hand the number of people that I would say outside of uh, psychological damage, which we still don't really have any good data for,
Yeah.
as far as really determining what's the root of the issue. I mean,
Well, with
that any
psychedelics,
some people say that it's just you're opening a door to something that was already there, underlying issues that had been exacerbated or
but everybody has a story about someone who lost their mind on psychedelics, and no one has any freaking evidence. I've never.
sounds like myths to me
God,
mostly.
I've heard so many of them. It's like,
Well, I know
what's this guy's name? Can I write him a
I,
letter?
I know Hamilton Morris says his best friend lost his
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I do know it.
But look at him. I mean,
And
he didn't let that deter him from being. I mean, I think he's like amazing.
I totally agree with his message. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad drug, but drugs
Yeah.
are
You sound like you're very
misused.
similar to his point of view when it comes to drugs,
I,
in a
I,
very
I
sort of
believe
semi-clinical,
I believe
like,
all drugs should be decriminalized. I
well, I'm
don't
with
think,
you there.
but I don't think that there should be no rules. Like, I don't think everyone should just be allowed to use heroin willy-nilly. But
Mhm.
heroin
Well, it's not.
is
It's certainly not a good idea, but
heroin is not
it should be
evil.
allowed.
It's a it's a it comes from a plant. It's not evil.
Mhm.
I don't have any desire to use heroin or opiates at all. But
It's the abuse that we. Well,
yes.
he has a great point of view where he says everything is different in the contextual circumstances. So like abuse of PCP in the United States in our subculture is so different than these people that use PCP here and have a completely different perception of it.
Right.
And like kind of the socio-cultural effects that drugs have on your like the psychological pre-existing notion that you have on it.
Yeah,
Like
everything you've
I
ever
think
heard about a drug makes the drug
mhm,
experience different.
absolutely.
And
What's
the laws
your
surrounding
expectations?
drugs.
Yeah,
When
100 for
when
sure.
everyone in America knows that heroin is evil, everyone knows that you're going to have an overdose and die. You're going to get addicted from your very first use. Well, when you know these things, it's very unlikely that you're going to get a different result when you use it, right?
Mm.
Because you know that's how it is. You just know it. It's not even like you don't even question it. You just know. Yeah, that's it. That's how it is. But that's just because that's the agreed upon idea of what this substance is here, and it's not like that everywhere. Uh, I just think decriminalization is the first step. I think once people stop going to jail for changing their consciousness, altering their states of consciousness, then the public perception of the chemicals can start to
Yeah.
evolve as well.
I think we're finally at that turning point.
And
Yeah.
I'm kind of stingy because I only enjoy psychedelics, so like kind of I don't really care if it goes past that. If psychedelics are the only one that gets this free pass, I'm not going to be upset, but I do think that all drugs should be decriminalized. But like, yeah, you shouldn't get yourself wrapped up in an addiction to a chemical that takes you away from functioning, being
Yeah, we don't want to be like Brave New World, or at least,
yeah, yeah,
everybody's just high on soma
yeah,
forever instead of existing.
right. But
But hey,
how do we know
it's a
that's
free.
not what's going on though?
It's supposed to be a free country, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's the freest, ain't it?
Well, I mean, you know, I would never go so far to say it's not. It's great. I mean, living here is amazing in
Yeah.
the Western world in general. Um, but definitely we got that wrong in the well, in the 70s, I guess, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
They had it right. I think it's just it was an overreaction to the psychedelic revolution of the
Yeah, the
60s.
counterculture.
Yeah, and these
Well,
people are like,
they
whoa, we got to put a stop to this craziness.
they made a mistake. They did. They made a mistake. The government um, was scared, obviously, because people were basically telling them that we're not. They like Rage Against
Well, I
the
think
Machine says. They
yeah,
said, "Fuck you. I won't do what you tell me." That's basically what they were saying. And it's like, well, come on. Society has to have rules, but if you can, if you can, be a part of society and still you can have your fun. So if you like LSD, you can use LSD, but you're still a member of society and you're still going to follow our rules. But they were
yeah.
basically
That's
they were saying no, like we're not going to
we
follow
want to
your
break
rules.
we want to break down society.
And that was the mistake because you hear this all the time from uninformed people that like we want to overthrow the government because it's corrupt.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
well, yeah, there's a lot of corruption in the government, but you don't understand how bad things are going to get without
Mm.
this.
Oh yeah.
That corruption that you hate so much keeps you safe. It
Hmm.
allows you to have some like relative freedom, some aspect of a good life. That if we didn't have rules and a structure, trust me, you would not be having a good life. You wouldn't.
I would say that's a uh, complete loss of perspective on our side, or on an individual side. Because I mean, all those things you said are so true. Like, yeah, you want to anarchy and you want to overthrow the government. Well,
Do you?
the next government's going to come in and take power, and
Yeah. Well,
who do you think that's going to be? Do you think it's going to be is that going to be a benefit? A what's a good word? Like a benevolent dictator that's going to take military control of this country after
right.
after you've overthrown the old guard. It's like, no,
And
man,
and
it's not going to be good.
if that didn't happen and your idea of anarchy came through, well, how long are you going to enjoy not having power? Have you ever lived without power for an extended amount of time? Because without these fucking rules,
Hmm.
people aren't just going to happily go to work and do their thing. The rules of society are what makes the engine turn. And when the lights go out and you can't cook your food unless you know how to cook on a fire, and
Yeah,
like
it's going to be hell to pay.
you don't get what you're doing. You don't understand the implications of these ideas.
I think
Um,
that's also that if I had to pick a single danger to psychedelics, I would say, in that vein, that the more you do certain types of psychedelics, the more well, it's almost like a double-sided sword. It's like you become more open to experiences. You also become a lot more susceptible to bad ideas.
Right.
So, a certain bad idea can take you and completely wrap your psyche, and then what? Yeah, it's great if the idea that hits you is that we're all one, and love is the greatest thing in the universe, because that's, I think, true in some deep way.
Yes.
But what if the idea is one of the bad is that this rule of law that we live by is the worst thing ever, and that you should be off doing some obscure weird thing with some I can't think of, some type of cult-like behavior,
Right.
that people often get gripped by, and that make no sense to us when we're looking at it rationally. But you've become so open to any idea, now all of a sudden something comes along and sweeps you up, and it may not be a positive thing.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest inherent danger
Right.
to psychedelics, which would be, I would say, completely counter to what most people would say is the dangers to them.
Well, here's
But
kind of an example of a psychedelic world. Would be Burning Man, which I've never
mm,
been, but like, here's this weekend where you are like off the grid. You're outside of society. You don't have the rules. But even this group has their rules, because guess what? There's always fucking rules. Somebody's making some rules. uh, but that's a cool idea. That's a cool weekend. Yeah, everybody agrees like we're gonna live this way for a weekend, but you don't get it when this is just the way of life forever. Like, really? You think
gets boring real fast.
oh my god, I don't want to live out in the fucking dust for
I
the rest
don't,
of
I
my
want to take
life?
I want to take a shower. How about
Right.
that?
Oh my god. Are showers so meaningful to you as they are to
Oh
me?
yeah.
They're like the highlight of my
There's nothing
day.
better. There's nothing better than a shower after you've
Oh
been
my god.
tripping for 10
Yes.
hours. You're like, oh God, I'm filthy.
There's nothing better than a shower at all, regardless of tripping. I woke up this
Like,
morning and I was like, I have to do a podcast, but I sure as hell ain't doing it without taking a nice hot shower.
yeah, yeah, I think, I agree. I agree.
I love showers, dude. They feel great. They give my life meaning.
Well, the simple things have meaning
Yes.
all of a sudden when you take a different perspective.
And so, like the other night, it wasn't last night. It was the night before last. So s- I've had this shift in my personality through taking psychedelics, but uh, I at the same time that I started taking psychedelics, I started meditating and I started therapy, and I go to therapy every week. Um,
Those are big, man. It's big.
and because so I psychedelics made me realize that I compartmentalized a lot of stuff. And I wanted to work through those. And I didn't just think, well, I need to take more, up the dose, because that's how I'm going to work through this stuff. No, I wanted to go and talk to somebody, because if I can't work through any of this stuff in a sober headspace, then what good is it? Because the
hmm
majority of the time, I'm going to be in a sober headspace.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing for people to know, is that this is the majority of your time, is this sober state.
hmm
So you need to figure out how to navigate life in that state.
That's right.
Don't try to find all the answers while you're high, because you're not high most of the time.
hmm
But so through therapy, I realized that, yeah, I had compartmentalized a lot of stuff, and I have issues. Like I said, I have some problems with anger, but I also realized that a lot of my misery was from I focused.
Self created
It was
sometimes.
self-created because I was so focused on the next great thing, the future, always with plans. And so, but the thing is, because I lived in the future, I wasn't present.
Mhm.
I didn't think, like, I wasn't lost in thought all the time. And like at night I could go to bed like like the flip of a switch. If I put my head on the pillow, I just fall right asleep. So
Wow.
now I'm much happier than I used to be because I've brought myself into the present. But in the present, my mind is much more alert, and meditation is super important to me now because it is my quiet time from my own thoughts. But at night, my brain just starts going, and if I don't meditate, I'm gonna be up a lot longer than I plan to because my mind is just like thinking. Um,
That's an interesting shift.
but so
Oh,
the other night, me and my wife were talking while my mind was racing. Normally, I just let it race, but then I was just, spitting these things out to her and, getting feedback from her. And uh, one of the things that I realized is that something that I failed to do in the past and still do pretty often is, and I think everybody needs to do this. I think this is highly important for um, creating happiness and contentness. Um, you need to imagine how bad things could get. And
oh,
you might think that you know how bad things can get, but I mean, set aside some time and regularly, maybe not every day, but I'd say at least once a week. Give yourself a little chunk of time, maybe 20 minutes, and really just close your eyes and let yourself truly, truly imagine how bad things could be. Because, like, yeah, I have my difficulties through my day, but let's go one layer down. Well, I could be slightly poorer than I am, so I would lose some of the luxuries I have. Well, that wouldn't be good. Then I wouldn't be as happy as I am. But then we could take away financial security entirely, and now I can't afford to eat. Well, now I'm basically just eating scraps, and I'm eating junk, and nothing nutritious or of value is entering my system. And now I'm really miserable. Now I'm having a really hard time being happy. But still, that's not that bad because I could be homeless. And like, wow, I really can't imagine what it would be like to be homeless because I never have been there.
you should
But
try though.
yeah, but
It's worth trying.
through trying to imagine it, it gave me a lot of uh, appreciation for the fact that I'm not. And then I thought, wait, being homeless in America probably isn't even that bad compared to fucking not having anywhere to live in the fucking plains of the savannah or something. Like you or the Serengeti where you could get eaten at any time and you're in constant fear. It could always be worse. And don't just say that. Don't just think, well, yeah, it could be worse.
No,
Really,
it's
really
really think about
examine that because you get so much perspective and it allows you to appreciate what you do have. And I'm telling you, a lot people listening to the sound of my voice right now probably have it a lot worse than I do. I'm sure they do. I've got a pretty decent life and I have no reason to complain. Um, but I bet they still have it a lot better than they realize. And you just need to spend a little bit of time thinking about how much worse it could be. I promise you, this exercise, this exercise could change your life. Just do it. Just try it. It's
that.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's really, really, really important. That kind of perspective of and gratefulness that you can divine from your. I mean, we all in this. I would say 99.9% of people, if you're living here in the United States or you're living in any other developed or Western country, I mean, it's just the life that we have here is unimaginable to somebody who lived 100 years ago. Not only
Yeah.
technologically, but just the things that we have at our disposal and at our fingertips every day. We just imagine putting Amazon Prime into 1850s America. I mean, it's just fucking incredible. Imagine,
Oh.
in the Middle Ages, like literally everything I could ever desire will be delivered to me in
Two
2 days,
days.
free shipping. So it's like pretty absurd. And
and
then
and we have
the
credit cards. You don't even have to be able to afford the thing that you want. You're like, fuck it. I'm just gonna buy it anyway.
the and the true absurdity is that there are people that think that somehow this is evil incarnate and that we should bring down the society as a whole to that just blows my mind. Like
You know what
that
really?
you can become so resentful towards your existence and towards this society.
Yeah,
Just does there's no rationale for me. I
I
think you've completely disconnected with what's real as a human.
I think one of the biggest complaints I hear from an American would be that they're bored. Because
You're bored.
because you don't
It's
really
like,
you don't have
don't
any
have you
real
ever heard of the
problems.
internet?
You just don't
It's
have
like,
any real problems. If you're bored, you don't have a real problem. And
well, I think that's
congratulations.
I think that's the biggest I think that's one of the biggest problems. I was listening to one of the older. Are you familiar with Jocko Willink?
I'm not.
He's an ex Navy SEAL, and he's become, I would say, like, he's got a book called Extreme Ownership. It's amazing if you
Okay.
ever want to check it out.
Okay.
And basically, what he did after he got out of, he was a Navy SEAL officer, um, and he, was a commander during uh, Iraq and Afghanistan. And when he got back to the United States, he ended up, what he would do is he would go to companies and teach them about leadership
Okay.
and with all of his experience. But he has a podcast now, and he has like, I would say he fits into the Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss model of, having interesting people on the podcast and talking about hard subjects.
Right.
And he was just like, I was listening yesterday. He's just like, people don't have the sorts of problems anymore that are real. It's like, if the internet, if Wi-Fi going out is your biggest problem during the day, and that it just ruins your day. Where exactly are we? You're not actually dealing in a rational headspace. Um, if the wireless internet is your biggest struggle for
And
the day, it's a
there's
it's a testament to the society we built, I guess.
I've definitely had times in my life where I've let something as trivial as that ruin my day. For sure.
There's there's a comedian that has I forget, it might be Rogan actually. There's a comedian, he has an amazing bit about Wi-Fi on the airplane. It's like, Wi-Fi on you're flying across the country on a flying vehicle, and
It's a miracle what's happening
it's a
right now.
miracle that
It's a
you're actually traveling,
miracle.
and yet there's a guy in the third row that's like com- completely pissed off that the Wi-Fi is not working today. Like, oh, fuck this thing. Like,
You are in
give me
the
a break,
sky,
man.
motherfucker.
Like, yeah, it's just bananas, like completely beyond comprehension.
That's such a good visualization,
Guy,
though.
he wants his flight refund because there's no Wi-Fi on the
Uh,
airplane.
uh, well, I'm sorry that you could have taken horse and buggy. You know,
Yeah, you could have went from San Francisco to L.A. 5 hours? No, it's like six
right?
days.
Yeah.
If you're 6 days in like in a car, like I wouldn't even imagine what is it going to be like a month on horseback or some shit.
Yeah. If you don't die
And
from dysentery.
yeah, exactly, the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
You have to ford the river.
Yeah. It's people can really lose sight of the big picture. Um, I think that's just come to bring this back around full circle. I just think that's something that psychedelics can give you back. I'm not saying that. Uh,
But you made a really good point where, and I think this is one of the integral parts of the Johns Hopkins research. It's not you can have the revelation in the moment of your psychedelic experience, but the really important part is integrating the experience into your everyday life, and
yes.
that's where the big changes are going to come.
Hmm.
If you can relate your profound experience and actually work through it on a day-to-day basis and continue with the insights that you've gained through your psychedelic revelation, and really work on it every day in a meaningful way and integrate that into your psyche, then you're really going to start to be dangerous. I mean, that's where the big changes are going to come, and the really big shifts in perspective. And it
Yeah.
sounds like I don't know if that was knowingly exactly what you did or unknowingly.
Unknowing.
Intuitively, it sounds like you've taken every step
Yeah, there
to
was.
integrate your experiences in with your own perspective on a day-to-day life, and that's I think really important.
Yeah, and I
You
won't.
kind of hit the nail on the head right there
I'm not gonna
with
tell you.
that.
I'm not gonna tell you my first trip. It'll be on the first podcast once that goes up. I did talk about it a little bit, and it's also documented on Reddit as well. It's my first post on Reddit. But my first trip was with an edible. It wasn't. There was
Oh,
no.
I think I may have read that in your
Okay.
profile.
Okay. And
I've had similar experiences with edible marijuana.
which
I'm not a and like you, which I think you said it was like your first marijuana experience ever, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah. So like you, I'd had a couple experiences here and there, but I was never like a day-to-day user. But yeah, marijuana edible is I've pr- probably had more intense experiences on marijuana edible than on mushrooms. I don't know.
Right.
I don't want to say they're good experiences, but they're more powerful.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but it's just like I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but it was odd because this is an idea, and I talked about this a little bit on the first podcast, but um, there's a religious concept, something you always hear inside of a Christian church is that people are called to things, and there's a calling, and
Hmm.
like this woman was called to serve ministry in Africa, and this man was called to coach basketball in the inner city, or anything. There's callings. People are just called to certain things, and that's a big part of the Christian church. It's like you need to find your calling, and everyone's asking each other. It's like, I don't know what my calling is. I don't know how I'm being called. But when you are called to something, I promise you're gonna know it. It's just like you're not constantly being called to things. I was called to try acid, and I didn't. I ended up using marijuana first. But for a solid year, I just out of nowhere, there was no reason. I'm telling you, there was no reason. I didn't see a cool documentary. I wasn't having a conversation with somebody, and they were like, "Man, acid's cool." I hadn't started listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. I didn't know anything about psychedelics, and it just like a bolt of lightning hit me, and it was like, acid. You need to do acid, and I didn't know what this was. I just had, like, out of nowhere, I had this overwhelming desire to alter my consciousness with LSD.
Yeah.
So I started researching, and I researched it, and I researched it to death. And I read everything you could possibly read about LSD. And I read trip reports. I read hundreds and hundreds of trip reports. And then one day I said, well, I don't want to just take acid. Like, I've never taken any recreational drug ever. I've never smoked a cigarette. I'm just going to take acid? That's
Wow.
crazy. So I was like, well, I do know somebody who sells weed. Maybe I should try weed. And then I was like, well, I don't smoke. I've never smoked anything. And I'm kind of afraid of smoking uh, because of that. Like, there's a stigma to it. Like I said, drugs aren't bad, but, they get these stigmas attached to them, especially here in
Hmm.
America. And I thought, well, smoking's not good. That can't be good for you. So I convinced this guy to make me an edible that was equivalent to 500 milligrams of THC, and I
Whew.
and I tripped my fucking balls off. I
Well,
had
no
no
wonder.
idea what I was doing. I had no idea, but that
I've had intense experiences on like 25 milligram edibles. 500. I think 500 would break the fabric of reality
it
for me.
did. It broke the fabric of reality for me. People on that Reddit post said that's not how drugs work, and I'm like, fucking try it. Challenge, man. Have you ever done it? But
Yeah, my first edible experience was horrifying to say the least. Um, but there was probably like 10 minutes of it that was really good,
a
and then
lot
like
of mine was
4 hours
a
horrifying.
lot of my trip was scary, but just because it wasn't scary and like I was just being scared. Like, oh, here's scary things. It was just like I could have never expected that to happen. So it was so alarming that I'd never changed my consciousness before. And here I am, like as far out as I've ever gone.
Mhm.
It's like, whoa. It's like I thought by trying weed first, I was dipping my toes in the pool. But what had actually happened was I fucking jumped into the ocean and a fucking whale grabbed a hold of me and just and pulled me 100 feet down immediately. It was like, get down here. This is what you're gonna experience. Yeah. So, but I was definitely called to the psychedelic experience. I thought I didn't know enough about psychedelics, and I thought when I thought about psychedelics, I thought about acid. I didn't know there was like a lot of options.
Mhm.
I had heard of mushrooms, but I didn't think that was anything similar. So, and I definitely didn't think pot was psychedelic. I had no fucking clue that pot could be psychedelic. Uh, but that's what I was called to. I wasn't called to acid. I was called to altering my consciousness with psychedelic drugs, because there was a hunger in me that I wasn't aware of. Uh, this hunger, I'm gonna get real deep on you here. This hunger is the the why. Why? That was the hunger.
Oh yeah.
I have a 5-year-old, but I also have an almost 2-year-old, and he says why to everything. And like Louis C.K. has a really good joke about this. Like, it drives parents crazy because their kids are just saying why all the time, but they just they get told because the answer's because. They hear that so many times, eventually kids stop saying why. But something happened to me, and I started saying why again. Here I am as an adult, and now I'm saying why again. I'm questioning everything because I don't know. I think maybe it's just me, but somewhere deep down inside of me, I'm not happy to accept uh, just like the understanding of everything that has just been provided. I want to know for real. And psychedelic drugs really give you they're a tool for figuring out why. Um, they
I would
also
say I would say that if I had to, you know, if I had to analyze that statement, I would say all those things you said are all right on the money, and that it sounds to me like you put your ducks in a row, right?
mhm,
You had your personal and family life together, and I think there's some kind of subconscious or unconscious drive that kind of says, you know, is this it? And that
right.
kind of goes along with the why question. And it's something that you probably don't even do consciously, but it's just like, trying to find a deeper meaning
Mhm.
in life. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like that is, I would say, the big question, right?
Yeah.
Finding the meaning within life, and then what happens after we die. I mean, is there anything deeper on a human level than that? I
Now
mean,
I can
that pretty much encompasses the entire concept of God in those two questions.
and I'm just
You
gonna
know,
put out a word of caution to people here because this is a rabbit hole, and not everyone is ready for this journey. Not everyone is ready to ask those questions. And when you start asking that questions, people don't. Not everybody's going to be able to understand why you're asking these questions. So it was a really big struggle when I first got interested in this with me and my wife. It was a huge struggle because here I am. I'm searching for why. I'm trying to find meaning. And when you're trying to find meaning in something, people who are in your life they might get the idea that you're no longer finding meaning in
hmm
like your relationships with them, and that's not what
that's
it
not
is.
true.
It's
Yeah.
so hard. It's really hard to get this through to people, and I still I have to reassure my wife all the time. I really do, because she's just afraid that I'm not satisfied
hmm
with being a husband and a father, and like I'm just searching for something more greater, but I'm not looking for something beyond what I have because I want something better or more.
You
I
want to enrich the things that you have.
Yes, 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 that's exactly what it
Yeah.
is. These things go hand in hand. um, I think any way that you can find more meaning is just going to make you a better, happier person. um,
And I'm sure it makes you a better husband and father.
I I
I don't-
I think so because I'm more self-aware than I ever was. If I'm If my son says something to me and it just irritates the pants off of me, and before I might just fly off the handle and just, go straight into punishment or like go to your room. And now I can actually see, like, I can see that irritation rising up in me,
Mhm.
and I can ask myself, why am I feeling this way? Why is this irritating me? And is this even something worth being irritated about? And I'm telling you, 99% of the time, it's not. It never
Yeah,
is. But
that's a big realization there.
but me a year ago, I didn't have that ability. I couldn't do it. I get irritated. I hold a lot of. It doesn't help to hold regret, but I have some regret that I feel like who I used to be. People probably walked on eggshells around me because they just didn't want to set me off. And that's a horrible thing to think about in retrospect. And I hate that. I hate that was ever who I was.
You
But
probably judge yourself a little more harsher than most people do,
I do.
which
I
is
do.
fair. I mean,
Um,
who else is going to?
but I'm not. If I think about the past, I get some negative emotions. But the real key to this, my new secret is just I don't think about the past. I try to stay out of the past as much as I can
Hmm.
because there's nothing I can do there anymore. It's fucking done. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, so people
Well, everybody's got something in their past that they regret.
people
Even
might think that you're not finding meaning in what you have when you go on these journeys and these searches, but it's not that you don't have meaning and you don't find meaning in what you've got. It's just that you need more meaning. You just need more additional meaning. It's not in place of. It's in addition to. Uh, and I think anything that you can do to increase meaning in your life. I mean, being present increases meaning. Um, that what I was saying earlier about thinking about how much worse things could be, that increases meaning. Just anything that you can do to increase the meaning you have in life, um, is going to make you happier because if you because these same thought processes of trying to find meaning, you could come to the same like the opposite realization, like, well, maybe there is no meaning because we're all just going to die anyway. But the meaning is something that you create, and you have
yeah.
to decide what's meaningful.
Well, I would say that the the nihilistic point of view, nothing has meaning, is the exact opposite of what it's the antithesis of that point of
Yes.
view of why. It's not the correct. You've not arrived at the answer. You've found the wrong answer.
Right. Right. Right.
In some sense. Um,
It's really
like,
easy to be nihilistic too.
yeah, it is, and it excuses any kind of agency, in my
But
opinion.
yeah, it does. You have no responsibility.
Yeah, it's
Um,
shallow in my estimation. It's what every 18-year-old views religion as, or any 18-year-old views the world in a hateful way. It's
right.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I did.
it sounds deep, but it's really lacking, I think, in every way.
Right. Right.
Like, I know, I think it's one of Nietzsche's famous quotes is, "He who has a why can bear anyhow." And
Mm,
I think that's true. I mean, if you've got purpose and meaning in your life, and it can be derived in 1,000 different ways.
right.
Um, but as long as you have a clear meaning to your life, nothing is going to break you,
Right. Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
important, I think. I kind of I feel like I'm on the same journey. Uh, I feel like you're further along than I see myself. Um, but I mean, hey, that's what it's about. It's about the journey,
Well,
and that's kind of what life is. It's about that.
I don't know that
Whatever
I'm
journey you're on, just do it to the best of your ability.
I don't know how far along I am, but I will say one advantage that I have is that my career, the job that I'm in, um, I'm really really good at it. I'm so good at it that I operate totally unconsciously. So I literally 5 days a week I get 8 or more hours of pure contemplation. I'm working, I'm very productive, but the whole time I'm thinking. And I don't know if a lot of people get that, like an 8 hour block of their day to really just philosophize in their head. Um, and it's a blessing and a curse. Don't get me wrong, because sometimes after you've just like I've been thinking really hard for 8 hours, then I get in my car and I start driving home. It can be hard to turn that shit off, but
Mm.
I just feel like I've thought a lot about these ideas. I've thought about them like just ad nauseum, repetition, unbelievable. Um,
So many people don't get that chance,
right,
to actually, I mean, just to think. I mean, thinking is hard, first of all. But yeah, I mean, to be in that zone where you're locked in and you're doing something like that, that's I would say, if that's not the definition of meaning,
right,
that's pretty close to it. I mean, being in that zone and doing something you enjoy and doing something productive and being extremely competent at it and finding, we call that the zone, right? That's
mm-hmm,
that's the you're in the zone.
right,
That is inherently meaningful, I think, in itself. And it's an interesting way you put it, where I'm in that zone and I can think about other things and really contemplate. That's
right.
kind of an interesting way to look at it, and that's so many people are just kind of like pinballed their way through life. They're just reacting to every stimuli that comes its way, and you just don't have that moment to sit and relax and really think about your experiences in any contemplative way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I feel like, a huge problem with our way of life in the 21st century. I mean, and that's kind of, I think uh, I think Joe has this line where he's like, I just wish I could give everybody a dose of whatever psychedelic. If just everybody just did a DMT trip, then at least we'd all be on the same baseline of understanding. If I could just give President Trump a 5-MeO DMT hit or whatever,
Yeah,
then we'd at least have somewhere to start our conversation. Or whoever,
right. Yeah,
whoever any politician or
yeah. You
even
said
any person. I mean, if just every person had all of a sudden, after your experience, you're gonna have a state of understanding that you didn't have before. Even if it's minute, even if it's minuscule, you just, maybe you're not gonna judge that person across from you,
yeah.
saying something you don't like, that you disagree with. Maybe you're just gonna judge them less because of it.
Maybe you're gonna
Maybe you're
think
just gonna
why?
want to have
What
a more meaningful conversation.
you're like?
Yeah. What?
What has brought this person to be in the mindset that they're in now, rather than just say that's not how I feel about things. This person's a fucking asshole.
Hmm.
Maybe you think
Yeah.
like what could happen in a person's life that would lead them to believe things this way, and what has happened in my life to make me think the opposite. I
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
tough to take stock of that.
quick judgments of people, uh, that's very cancerous.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not
Well, it's
healthy.
tribe. It's tribal. I think
Yeah, yeah,
you're us versus them.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
person's not me because they don't think the same way I think,
It's
or
like nobody thinks the
whatever.
same, dude.
Hopefully not. That would be boring.
Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
experiences life the same. It's not the same, no matter how similar you are. Two people who live, have the same jobs, live in the same town, take the same bus, their experience is 100% different. You can't.
I feel on the other side of that coin. I feel like there's also a danger of only valuing the experiential aspect.
Mm,
Like, there's kind of this, I would say, this thought within the intersectionality argument that every person's experience is to be valued on top of everything else, and it's like, well, that there's definitely some truth to that. But experience, personal subjective experiences, well, first of all, it's inherently subjective. So
right.
what if their reading of their own experience is completely off base? I mean, that's perfectly possible.
Yeah, mine was
You
for a
can,
long time.
yeah. I mean, your unconscious evaluation of your own experience is probably the most incorrect thing you could imagine. I mean,
Mm,
especially if the lens you're viewing your own experience with is flawed.
right.
So it's like, yeah, we should. You're placing the value on the experience when you know the value is on the individual, um, and their experience.
Mm,
The healthy individual, uh, the developed and conscious individual, should have an experience that's worth valuing.
right.
And even an unhealthy individual has an experience worth valuing, but you've got to be careful with the way that you take stock of these things. I don't. It's a I would say that's a hard line to travel, but uh, I feel like that. I feel like people's quote unquote experience gets valued and devalued now, depending on what their upbringing was, what their background is,
Right.
race, gender, color, origin, whatever way you want to define people,
Yeah.
which is inherently unhelpful to me, um, and
Yeah.
divisive and toxic in my experience.
Hmm. But
Um,
should I value your experience?
yeah, well, I think you value the individual thing else,
Yes.
and then you kind of take stock of that. Um, yeah, I mean, experience matters,
Well, yeah,
but
I think it
it's
does,
not everything.
but it's it's
Because you
interesting.
what happens when you get, like, if you're going to a psychiatrist, and you're gonna relay to them your experience through your subjective lens, and hopefully if they're a good psychiatrist, they're not going to instantly judge you, but they're probably looking at you saying, hey, your story doesn't add up.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. That's
there's
true.
there's a truth there that's hard to quantify,
Yeah.
but
Well.
it's definitely at baseline. If you just treat every individual with some sort of understanding and compassion, then you're going to have a good time, I think, most of the time.
Yeah. That's true. Compassion is important. Uh, I think compassion can be problematic too, though. I think it can also go too far.
Yeah,
Um,
well, just like what do you like the if you were to put it in a narrative or mythological standpoint, it would be the overbearing mother, the evil
yeah.
queen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, compassion definitely, because compassion for one maybe at the expense of another, or yeah, it definitely can go too far, and it definitely can become such like a toxic thing where it's almost like you're devaluing the individual, because it's almost like you're looking at them like they need to be helped.
Right. Uh,
It's like, well, they can't help themselves, so I need to be helpful to them. I need to give them a helping hand.
and I
It's like
guess.
that's inherently unhelpful.
Right.
you know
Right. Yeah.
I you need to be empowering that, and like that's the psychoanalytical rule number one. You don't rob the person you're trying to help of their destiny,
Right. Their ability to
right?
overcome their problems. If
It's
you
their problem, and
if
if they don't
you
work through it on their own, then you've completely stolen their.
the growth aspect of it. They're like, well, now this problem's gone, but I haven't developed.
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah. So
exactly.
that's kind of the Christian taking up your cross.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah. Well, that's a powerful idea,
it's your burden to bear, and yes, don't
and
put
I
your
think,
problems on me, man.
well, I think going back full circle back to Christianity, that's kind of like lost that way of thinking, I think, in the
Yeah.
West, or at least in Protestant
I
versions.
think I think Christianity has so many good metaphors for this, for just the reality
hmm
of spirituality. It's just, yeah. I think a lot of churches take things too literal,
hmm
um, and then they just try to push their own
Well, it's
agendas.
the interpretation is wrong,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You've taken the 50% and interpreted you know, in, incorrectly. Your lens that you're viewing the scripture with is I think flawed.
Right.
You know, which is why I think the work that like Jordan Peterson does is so powerful,
Oh
because
yes.
he's taken, I think, the correct lens in which to apply it. It's not it's not it's not rules to govern your life. It's a mode of existing in the world
Right.
that is the true underlying power of these stories,
Yes.
and of these histories that we have. Because I mean, you know, it's not the, and it's also not the, we in Protestantism you take this, it's the belief in God or the belief in Jesus that makes you a Christian. And it's like, you know, that only gets you so far.
Right. Well, it gets you to
Believing that
heaven.
somebody believing that somebody did this literal act to save the world doesn't actually do anything for you. It's when you say this this mode of action that this person undertook is the best model for being and living a meaningful life.
Right. It takes it
This
can
this is this is the form I need to mimic,
it
so to speak.
reduces suffering. Um, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Like,
I think Jordan is brilliant in that aspect. I think he totally gets um what the moral of the stories are. You know, that's it's trying to teach you that there are actual like ways that you can live that will uh make life better. Not maybe not happy. It might not make you happier.
maximize your meaningful existence.
Yes, yes, it will give you the most value. Um,
Take that cross and
mm,
take it, bear, you know, move uphill to the highest good that you can imagine.
right, right.
Yeah, that's a
So,
tough.
um, we've got 6 minutes left, and we got so off track that we never actually detailed your first your
Yeah.
first trip. How that's how things go sometimes.
Well, I think we got into a little bit of some of my LSD revelations.
Yes, yes, just in a roundabout way, I'm sure. Um, maybe next time we can get into that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Um, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I just think that if you can't find the meaning in life, start looking,
Hmm.
because it's there. What you find meaningful might not be the same thing that I find, or vice
Of course not.
versa.
Yeah,
But
that's good. Yeah,
you
should
can
be.
find the meaning. You can find it. It is there. Uh, you might have to make it, but it's there. Um,
Well, you gotta find that. I think there's a you gotta find your calling, like
right.
your like your church mates told you.
Well,
But
kind of with the
it's not gonna
calling,
come from nowhere. It's gonna come from yourself.
I think a lot of people get wrapped up in that, like, oh, what's my calling? I don't know what my calling is. And it's kind of how you were talking about me having my ducks in a row. Maybe your calling doesn't actually present itself to you until you have worked your way up that Maslow's chart of, hierarchy of needs. Um, because, there are things that you need as an individual. You need at the base level, you need security. You need like food and water, and then the next level you need shelter. Then the next level you need is it relationships? You need people, and then
Hmm.
the next level you need intimacy. So there's like the sexual aspect, and then then the next
Well,
level is
intimacy even goes beyond that. I think,
yeah. Well, yeah, it does, but I think if you're not experiencing that part, I don't know. I think it plays a big role.
Yeah.
It does for me personally. um, huge.
It
But
kind of it's almost you could compare it to the psychedelic
oh,
experience.
it's a
You know,
very
it's like
transcendental experience.
it enhances the intimate experience, you could
It does.
say,
It does.
in the way that psychedelics enhance the the consciousness experience.
Yes. So then after the intimacy level is self-awareness. And then Maslow, before he died, he ended up adding a sixth uh, uh, step on the hierarchy ladder, and it is transcendence. So
Mm.
he must have been dipping into the mushroom brews and stuff. I have to imagine he was, but
Well, it sounds kind of like a Buddhist or a Hindu philosophy,
I feel
but
like once I made it to step uh, 5, when I was becoming more self-aware,
you
then
start your search for the transcendent.
the calling just kind of appeared. It just kind of showed up. So don't maybe where you shouldn't be looking for your calling. Maybe you should be getting your ducks in a row.
You should be open to the idea that will scoop you up
Mm,
and drive you forward.
yeah.
If you're not, maybe you're not looking for it, but you're at least open
Yes.
to accessing a new mode or accessing, a new path.
Right.
And I think that's what an amazing thing about psychedelics is you become open to new pathways
Right.
when your brain, it's some I feel like I feel it's definitely something to do with the the neurological structure in your brain that just is overhauled with the
Oh yeah.
psychedelic experience, especially mushrooms.
Yeah.
I feel personally that mushrooms are the well, I haven't had a DMT experience. I can imagine that's
Well,
probably works in extremely similar ways, but I really feel like with mushrooms, you like are actually putting a reset button on your brain.
yes.
LSD in some sense, but I feel like it's a little more artificial,
Mhm.
and not quite as long lasting.
Right.
With mushrooms, it feels like a complete natural step, and it changes everything, I think. And you can really,
Well,
at a meaningful juncture in your life, if you if you have a mushroom experience, you're going to be better off afterward.
hmm. Right.
Just from the yeah, it's almost to me it's like it's like a reset button for your brain operation.
Hmm. Well,
Um,
there's something to it because you've seen about its neurogenesis
hmm
creates
hmm
new neural pathways,
Yeah, that's
allows
definitely sounds
allows
right to me.
it allows neurons to connect to each other and fire quicker. And also, while you're under the influence, it deactivates some parts of your brain that are like in control of different emotional responses. And so I mean it's a very interesting concept. In fact, the neurogenesis part is so fascinating that I would love to go on a long microdosing experiment. I'm not quite there.
Yeah,
I'm not quite there yet, but just to see if it has any sort of cognitive improvement over
I
like a
think
long period of time.
you'd probably in a perfect spot to do it as well, because you've
Mm-hmm.
already got your kind of like like your 8 hour routine, like you were saying, where you kind of you're in the zone. I mean, that's like the perfect, I think, microdosing environment.
Right.
To would only accentuate that feeling of productivity, and
Right.
that feeling of you're in the moment, in the zone, doing what you're good at. Uh, that would I would imagine that would be amplified to the 100th degree.
Right. Yeah. So that might be something. That might be something that I'll be doing soon. But
Yeah, let me
um,
know how that goes.
yeah, yeah, I definitely will. This podcast will definitely be an outlet for that kind of information. Man, I really appreciated having you on. I
This
think
is awesome. This is so much fun, man.
it is. It's a tremendous amount of fun. It is another way that I'm adding meaning to my life. Uh, this has meaning to it. Having this conversation with you today has made, like, it's put a lot of momentum in this day for me. This is how I started my day. Woke up, took a shower, and I had this amazing conversation that doesn't happen. These kinds of conversations just don't just happen. So we made this happen, and now I get to carry out this momentum for the rest of the day. It can only get better. So I just want to thank you so much for entertaining me for the last couple of hours. I think these sort of long form conversations are going to be very well received. I can't wait to share this with the general public.
Yeah, thank you, man, as well. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hope we get to do it again.
yeah, me too. Absolutely. As long as you're available, I definitely think we should.
Yeah, sounds great, man.
All right. Well, you have a great day, and I will talk to you later.
Yeah, you too. Take care.